before we move on from this idea of ego, we did the Cheryl B. Klein side. We talked about author ego. What about editor ego? How much of an editor ego is healthy, and how much gets in your way, and how do you keep it in check? Because there have to have been moments. My God, you're walking around in your 20s. I have the Harry Potter manuscript. There had to be a little bit of a boost to your self-esteem. It's somewhere in there that maybe got just a little bit larger than was healthy.
Oh, goodness. Well, I mean, I'm laughing just because, like, if there's anything, like, certainly, if you are acquiring, what do I want to say about this? Yeah, there are all sorts of ways to have a healthy self-esteem as an editor. Like, if your books are, well, how about this? The measure of success for an editor is generally like how well your books do. You know, like you want to make beautiful objects, but then you want those beautiful objects to find their way into readers' hands, and you want them to sell. So like the definition of success for an editor is, to some extent, how well do your books sell, or how well are they received by the critics, or what kind of awards do they receive, which often usually corresponds to selling. And there are a whole bunch of factors that we do not control as editors. They're like I think authors are very used to seeing editors as like all-powerful godheads, and editors do not experience our lives that way at all.
Well, maybe not other editors I've talked to, but you're the executive editor for Lee and Low. Surely you, if anybody would have that, I would think. I'm talking to her.
I mean, certainly, like, yes, we have the ability to make books happen, in the sense that we have the ability to buy manuscripts and to turn them into objects and hopefully get the books out there. But even saying that, like, most editors are subject to the whims of a higher authority, whether it is an acquisitions board or their boss. Like, some houses have you have to go through your boss, and so in that way, like, our power is not untrammeled. Like, it's dependent upon our ability to persuade people above us to let us do this thing. And quite often those people above us are highly influenced by their people above them, which is often, like, at a big corporate house like Scholastic or like Random House or something, it's the book buyers at bookstores. So, like, if the Barnes and Noble rep has said, like, in their last meeting, the Barnes and Noble rep said, poetry books never ever sell, then books that involve, then, like, it's going to be hard for me to get this little book through my acquisitions board. And in fact, I will tell you, this book, I was pitched this book. The author sent me this manuscript in 2011 when I was at Scholastic.
Wow.
And I loved it immediately. But I thought I shared it with my boss at the time, and he was not into it. And if he wasn't into it, then the editorial board wasn't. Certainly, the acquisitions team was definitely not going to be into it, because, again, it's kind of a quiet manuscript about a grandfather-grandson relationship and poetry. And so I held on to it.
I haven't read it, but just the way you've described it, I can imagine every librarian in the world that wants to talk about poetry, that's the book they would reach for, I would think. It
was a hard sell. It was a harder thing to do. And so much depends upon the house you're at and how the house sees itself. Like, if the house sees itself as very literary and thoughtful, like FSG. Like, I love the books that my friends at FSG do, and they think they're like the literariest of the literary. Versus if you're at a more commercial house where their goal is to, like, get their books on the Times bestseller list, all the time, or something like that. Then that will influence, like, what kind of books the editor can acquire there. What kind of books does the house succeed with? Like, at Scholastic, we did an amazing job selling middle grade fiction. So if you could get a middle grade fiction to us, like, we could blow it out of the water. Other categories we didn't do so well at, and that made it more difficult sometimes to acquire those categories. It's all over the place, and it all shifts over time, and it all depends upon the moods of sometimes the stock market, sometimes the buyers at Barnes and Noble, sometimes, you know, this, that, or the other thing. And so, well, coming back to the point you were making about editors and egos, we are also subject to agents. Because agents will send us things or not send us things. They will send us things and then announce a week later that they're holding an auction and we have to have bids in within 3 days, you know, which requires that you must drop everything else you're doing and put together all your materials to acquire this book. And then that means you have to go and like supplicate yourself at the feet of your boss about acquiring this book. So all of which is to say, it's very easy to have a big ego as an editor, but it's also very easy not to. Because you're constantly like having people tell you that you're not good enough, or I don't know if that's not the right phrase, but you're constantly sort of battling to do the books you want, to get support for the books you want, to convince agents to give you the books you want, to get the money to buy books from those agents. Like you don't have time to have an ego because you're constantly convincing other people to let you do things. That's sort of, or talking to authors and trying to get authors to do the things that you want them to do to make the book turn out. Which you think is in the book's interest, which you hope is also what is in the author's interest, you know, to get the author to, I don't know. but and all this is to say, I don't know very many editors who have big unhealthy egos, like that. I would say, like, I guess
there is this much opportunity. If I would have thought, and this continues to amaze me as I do up to the show.
I should also note that this has that there's most of my close editor friends are women, and I think that makes a difference too. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we could probably read between the lines, but if you wanted to explicitly state it, I would allow it. I would be happy to hear it. No, I was going to say what continues to amaze me is I'm talking with authors who, in my mind, have to be the end all be all. I'm talking sometimes with folks that every author I've talked to is amazing, but sometimes I'm talking with somebody that, okay, you've been doing this long enough, you're famous enough, nobody should be able to tell you no. And on the editor side of that, I would think Cheryl Klein, author of Second Sight, that's where you've got to be. Who is at that level? Who can get to that point where nobody tells me no? I have an idea for a book. We're doing it. I Thanos snapped this thing into existence. Is there anybody in publishing that has that, or is everybody in some way having to negotiate?
I mean, I think there are people I can name. Yeah, there are people who I really admire who can just do stuff. I think who can get the money just by going like that, and who do great books because of it. But all of us are subject to, not subject, that's the wrong word, but all of us are responsible for persuading our sales team or persuading people like this is how we should spend our money. And this is how much money we should spend. And because we're all responsible for making money in the end, I would say. Yeah.
Fair enough.